History remembers Madara Uchiha as a god of combat, but the timeline of his greatest ascension contains a glaring logical error. We know the facts. Madara awakened the Rinnegan at the absolute end of his natural life. He was bedridden, skeletal, tethered to the Gedo statue just to keep his heart beating. Within days, perhaps hours, of that awakening, those eyes were removed and transplanted into a young Nagato Uzumaki. Here's the question the history books skip over. When did he practice? Limbo. Hengoku isn't a punch or a kick. It is a multi-dimensional synchronization. It requires the user to project their shadows into a parallel partition of reality, a space that technically doesn't exist to the human eye. How did a dying man, who had never even seen this dimension, instantly understand how to navigate it? How did he know his clones could strike from behind the veil without being touched in return? The answer isn't genius. It's biology. Madara didn't learn Limbo. He triggered a phylogenetic reflex. It was a biological knowledge download encoded directly into the Indra lineage DNA. The moment the Rinnegan booted up, the manual was already installed. Madara didn't have to study the dimension because his DNA had been waiting 1,000 years to return to it. To understand why Limbo is so dangerous, we have to look at the architecture of the dimensions themselves. Not all pocket spaces are created equal. Obito Uchiha's Kamui is a vault. It is a separate volume of space with physical, impenetrable walls. To interact with it, you must enter or exit through a dedicated door. When Obito is inside his vault, he is safe, but he is also isolated. He cannot reach through the walls to strike you. He has to step back into our world to make contact. Limbo operates on a completely different set of physics. It isn't a separate room, it is a parallel partition. Think of it as a screen room built exactly over our reality. It occupies the same coordinates, the same space, but it exists on a different phase. This is the thin veil. Madara himself cannot enter this partition. His human OS is too heavy, too physically anchored to our world. But his clones, they are pure data projections. They live behind that screen. Because the veil is so thin, the clones can punch through the mesh. To the victim in our world, there is no attacker, no warning, just the sudden, violent impact of a fist, stretching through the very fabric of space. This is the phased combat script. In the screen room, you aren't just invisible. You are untouchable, right up until the moment you decide to strike. Once we understand the architecture of the screen room, we must address the most pressing anomaly, their destructive force. Standard human logic dictates that a clone should be weaker than the original, but Limbo clones have been observed knocking around full-size tailed beasts like ragdolls. This isn't a matter of higher chakra levels, it is a question of pure physics. To understand why a digital projection hits harder than a human body, we have to look at neural inhibition. The human brain is pre-installed with biological limiters. Our nervous system consciously restricts muscle output to approximately 60 to 80% of their actual mechanical potential. This is a crucial safety protocol. It prevents us from punching with enough force to tear our own ligaments or shatter our own bones. Your brain protects you from yourself. Madara's Limbo clones are massless. They have no biological CNS. They have no pain receptors. They are data projections, and therefore, they are not bound by the safety protocols of the human OS. They can exert 100% mechanical efficiency on every single strike. They don't have to brace for impact. They are the impact. Now, add the variable of acceleration. Within the Limbo dimension, a thin partition of reality, the clones might not be subject to atmospheric drag or friction. A Limbo clone doesn't have to fight against the air until the exact millisecond it makes contact with its target in our world. It reaches top speed instantly, and it hits with 100% efficiency. This is the ghost punch, a freight train collision that you can't see from an opponent who cannot feel. It is a 100% efficiency strike delivered through a screen wall, optimized to delete anything standing on the other side. To understand why Madara could command the Limbo dimension, while Nagato Uzumaki, a shinobi of immense chakra, could not, we have to look at the hierarchy of system access. In the world of dojutsu, the eyes are merely the hardware. The DNA is the license. Madara Uchiha is the natural admin. Because he possesses the Indra genetic trace, his biology is natively compatible with the Rinnegan source code. For Madara, awakening the eyes wasn't just a power-up, it was a system update. The Rinnegan acted as a master key, automatically unlocking the Limbo Hengoku encrypted system files. He didn't have to learn how to access the parallel partition. His human OS was simply patched to recognize it. Nagato, by contrast, was a guest user. He had the hardware, the physical eyes, but he lacked the genetic signature to bypass the Otsutsuki encryption. This left Nagato in a state of trial and error. He spent years manually reverse engineering the basic apps of the Rinnegan, the Six Paths, gravity manipulation, soul extraction, mechanical summoning. These are the public-facing features of the eyes. They are powerful, but they are not the system files. This also explains Nagato's bandwidth issues. Because his brain didn't have the phylogenetic reflex to automate these processes, the mental load was too great for one body to handle. He had to outsource the processing power. By splitting the Rinnegan's functions into 6 separate corpses, he was essentially creating a distributed server network. He had to manually route chakra bandwidth just to keep the system stable. Madara doesn't need 6 bodies. He has the admin root. He runs the entire suite of Otsutsuki scripts, including the Limbo partition, on a single optimized node. Nagato was a genius who learned to use a foreign tool. Madara was the owner who finally remembered where he kept the keys. If the Limbo clones exist behind a thin veil, how do you fight something you can't touch? The answer lies in the baryogenesis link. In our previous analysis, we deduced that the Otsutsuki possessed the ability to compress pure chakra into high-density physical objects. These aren't just weapons, they are hardware anchors. When Naruto used chakra rods to pin a Limbo clone, he wasn't just using a spear, he was using a staple. Because these rods are composed of the same high-density Otsutsuki material as the clones themselves, they exist in both dimensions simultaneously. By driving a rod through a clone, you are effectively locking its coordinates to the physical world. You are tethering the screen room to the floor. But the most critical piece of this framework is the driver requirement. For the entire Fourth Ninja War, the Limbo clones were an invisible, unstoppable force. Then, Naruto and Sasuke received the Six Paths chakra directly from the source. Suddenly, the invisible became visible. The intangible became tangible. In the community, this is often called six-path sensory. In this dossier, we call it a compatibility patch. It wasn't magic that allowed Naruto to sense them or Sasuke to see them. It was a system sync. By receiving Hagoromo's chakra, they finally installed the Otsutsuki OS. They were no longer running on the limited human OS that filters out parallel partitions. They were granted the same administrative view as Madara himself. To fight a god, you have to speak their language. To see the Limbo dimension, you have to be running the same script. The final battle wasn't just a clash of ninja, it was the moment the human OS finally upgraded to the level of the architects. The analysis of the border jail, Hengoku, or as it is commonly known, the Limbo partition, requires us to revisit a critical technical question. Why were these capabilities absent from the system's primary test subject, Nagato? The answer is not one of power, but of system privileges. Our data confirms that the Rinnegan is essentially a dual-user OS. While it grants access to the standard Six Paths protocol, which we can classify as the factory-installed basic apps, the specific capability of Hengoku, Limbo is a unique, user-specific administrator privilege. It is only accessible to the OS's original developer or a fully synchronized Uchiha administrator. Nagato was operating with guest access, lacking the required kernel privileges to trigger the Limbo partition. Secondly, the visualization of the Hengoku partition itself must be refined. Limbo is not a distant time, space, or separate dimension. It is technically classified as a border jail. It is an invisible frequency that overlaps perfectly with the real world, occupying the same space at the same time, but on an undetectable topological plane. The objects within it can be measured via specific recursive data flux, but they are physically unreachable from the real world side. This technical duality is what governed detection. While any standard sensory unit could fail to even perceive the noise, only 6-pass level sensing could map the recursive data signatures. Conversely, only a visual link established via another Rinnegan could render the data visually, essentially translating the raw flux of the Limbo partition into a readable image. The data confirms that to counter Limbo, the observer must operate on the same technical plane as the administrator. Error log complete. We have spent this investigation deconstructing the magic of the Rinnegan, but the truth is far more clinical. Madara Uchiha didn't master a dimension through willpower. He triggered a phylogenetic reflex. He was a recipient of a 1,000-year-old combat script, dormant in the Indra lineage, waiting for the right hardware to boot up. The screen room of Limbo wasn't a discovery. It was an inheritance. We see the difference in the results. Nagato Uzumaki, the guest user, struggled with bandwidth and manual trial and error to operate the basic functions of the eyes. Madara, the natural admin, simply looked into the void and saw a weapon system ready for deployment. But if the Rinnegan can instinctively unlock a parallel partition of reality, if it can bypass the human OS to exert 100% mechanical force, then we have to ask the ultimate question. What happens when the sync is complete? If Limbo is just a screen room on the edge of our world, what lies behind the deeper partitions? And more importantly, if the DNA can overwrite the mind with a combat script, who is actually pulling the strings when a user reaches 100% Otsutsuki sync? The archive is still decrypting. We'll see you in the next dossier.